Welcome back to the channel. This game is the third round in the Commonwealth Championship Nigel was playing in 1985. He had a quick draw in round two. And this game's against Praveen Thipsay, a Indian Grandmaster. The game started as a French defence. And the Winawer variation. Asking the question of the bishop. And queen to d7, preparing to develop the queen on the queen side. And black offers to trades the white bishops early. Here Nigel could have castle queenside and gone for a kingside attack, but chose to castle kingside for a quieter game. The knight jumps to g5. It seems to lose the tempo, but I think he's heading to h3 and with an eye on the f4 square. And black develops the knight, keeping an eye on the f4 square as well. Quite an aggressive thrust by white to cause some danger on the king side. And now the pawn storm on the king side. But black finds a good response. f6 hitting the centre, threatening to open up the f file. And white continues to force things on the king side, but perhaps missed this move, which is a nice move, pinning the g pawn to the queen. And white drops the queen back. Black plays a natural king to h7, but actually in this position there was a better move, very hard to spot, which would be the h5. And the idea is that if white takes the pawn, then black can play king to f7 and play rook to h8 and force pressure along the open h file. The king to h7 was played, and white wants to double the rooks on the e file. The c5 was played to hit the centre. Maybe e5 would have been better with the same idea. But after the rook to e2, now the e pawn's under pressure. Black defends it. White sidesteps out of any potential pins along the g file. Trader pawns in the centre. And queen to e8. Maybe again slightly inaccurate. White can't take the pawn as queen to c8, and it's hitting the bishop, hitting the rook. So the rook has to go back to e1. The rook to e5 is a nice move, hitting the queen, hitting the rook with a check. And this would be quite good for black. So the pawn wasn't taken. White played bishop to a3. Queen to f7 to put pressure along the f file. And the game's still very double-edged. Black's still got a few problems to sort out. He's still under quite a lot of pressure on the king side. Which g1 obviously making more pressure. And white strikes back in the centre with e5. Pawn trade on f6. And bishop to b2, putting more pressure on the e5 pawn. Maybe a better option would have been to possibly take the pawn first. And then maybe something like queen e2, putting pressure on the knight. But it's still pressure for black to deal with. He drops the knight back to f8, which looks a bit a bit passive. But the idea is to play rook to g6, hitting the queen, and perhaps trading off the rooks, which he does. But again, I don't think that's the best option. He's getting rid of one of his defenders, and White still has a very strong attack, and is clearly got an advantage in this position. Knight to e6, hitting the queen, but it does give up the d pawn. I think the black's idea is to try and get his pieces mobilised for the extra 2 pawns he's down, but the position doesn't look very good for him. Queen to e4, hits the queen again, and I think the queen probably maybe moves to the wrong square there. The idea is obviously to put more pressure, still put pressure on the g7 square. I think the better option would have been the better option would have been e6, and the idea is it's hitting the queen, which has to retreat, and White can simply trade the queens off, and is in a much better position in the endgame. So e6, I think, would have been a winning move for White. But queen to g4 was played, and I think this allows Black some counterplay. He chooses queen to a2, maybe queen to b3 would have been more accurate. But White just ignores the threat, and obviously threat of the bishop, and plays rook to g3, threatening queen g7 mate. Black defends it, and then White plays queen to b4, again another inaccuracy. He's threatening the knight on e7, but allows Black a tactic, starting with queen to b1, check. And the idea, knight to d5, obviously gets the knight out of the threat. It hits the queen with tempo. The queen comes back to the centre, but again this allows Black a very nice tactic. The actual bishop's on pre, but the tactic that's played is even stronger. And that's knight to e to f4. So after the trade of knights, the Black king has to go to f3. And White can now check on d1 and pick up the bishop with check. And now he's turned a completely losing position into a completely winning position. Just with a couple of inaccurate moves from White. King to c4, queen to a2. I think queen to c2 would have been better, as we'll see. I think if you play queen to c2, you get this variation where Black can simply pick up the e pawn. Oh, so not in this position, so we can't. Sorry. He plays this first, then here, then he can pick up the e pawn. So this would have been a better option. We play queen to a2, and now queen to e6. White plays the check. Maybe d4 would have been more sensible. He comes back, and Black blocks the checks. Now he plays d4. And Nigel plays rook takes f2 here, but I think the better move would have been rook to f4, which he does play eventually. But it forces the queen onto a bad square, which can be traded. You can just pick up the d pawn, completely winning. He plays rook takes f2 first, but White misses that. You can just drop the rook back. White tries to repeat, but now he plays rook to f4. Another check. And Nigel plays queen to e7, which is not the best. Knight to e7 is just totally winning. But he plays queen to e7. Queen to c6. White is desperate to keep the queens on the board. Knight to f8. Just getting the knight out of the way of the threat. Queen to c4, threatening queen g8 mate. And knight to e6 just blocks the attacks. Queen to c2 check. King to h1, but White is running out of moves. He plays queen to g6, again threatening Queen's G8 mate, but misses the fact that he's allowed mate into with knight to c5 check. And the idea is obviously if he takes the knight, then we'll take a4's mate. So Thipsay resigned in this position. A very topsy-turvy game, which I think Nigel was very lucky to win in the end. A couple of inaccuracies by White allowed him completely back into the game. A very interesting game, but yeah, not the most accurate game in the world, but a good game nevertheless. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the game. And until next time, bye for now. Cheers.